As many of you know, Southeast Asia has actually undergone a massive transformation in the last decade. And today we're going to spotlight some of the many countries in the region that have actually taken the steps towards the energy transition. I'm Mark Hood, as Roland's just mentioned. I've recently joined Coro Energy PLC as the CEO. And this evening, we're going to explore what makes the energy transition in Southeast Asia such a compelling investment. I'm also joined by Christie, the CFO, to take us through some of the historical and finance-related information. So just a bit of brief background on Coro Energy PLC. Coro is AIM-listed, a UK-based partner, developer and operator of transitional energy projects in Southeast Asia, with a vision to lead the region in the transition from fossil fuels to low-carbon energy. Coro has an exciting blend of gas and early-stage renewable energy assets. And just to give a bit of history on that, we have a selection of operational gas assets in Italy. We're non-operator of 15% position in the Duyung gas asset in Indonesia, which is actually one of the largest discoveries within the basin. And that comes along with 2C reserves of 495 BCF. More recently, Coro announced our strategic pivot towards clean energy, and we acquired 20% in Ion Ventures, who are a UK-based battery storage developer with focus on UK and Southeast Asia. That happened within Q3 2020. And more recently still, Coro acquired GPL, bringing, amongst other things, a large portfolio of early-stage renewable energy projects in Southeast Asia. So really, this gives us those first steps to lead the transition from fossil fuels into clean energy within Southeast Asia. Oh, sorry, broke the slides. So why Southeast Asia? Really, for a multitude of different reasons. Coal is predominantly still the dominant fuel source within Southeast Asia. Many countries have actually now started to change their focus, with government having clear direction and clear focus on renewables, particularly where energy security is required. But ultimately, for most, they're actually now starting to have a regimented policy for renewable energy as part of regulation and legislation, which is a key point for us. But also, Southeast Asia obviously has a very high demand for power. People pressure is also giving a huge transition to the clean energy story, with governments now bearing down to that. But equally, we've also got proven projects already in existence demonstrating that it is possible to have very positive outcomes for renewables within Southeast Asia. So ultimately for us, and for most other developers out there now, Southeast Asia is actually starting to signal all the ingredients for the transition to successfully working with clean energy and starting to do that transition from the coal across to non-fossil fuels and alternative energy. So just a bit about the energy transition. So 2020 saw an unprecedented change for most E&P companies with low oil prices, and the pandemic really did affect everybody. Coro was very quick to react publicly, identifying a strategy to pivot towards clean energy production. And the energy transition from black to blue to green, or coal to gas to renewables, is well underway within the region. Now, multitude of different reasons for that, but ultimately we come down to the region has very good resources for both solar and wind. The proven technology is now actually really starting to come through, and renewables themselves have no greenhouse gas emissions. So obviously another huge tick in the box to be able to get stuff ready and get stuff moving there. Finance is also readily available for strong projects, but ultimately commercially the possibilities for renewables and the adaptation or the adoption is really the low-cost power production, outcompeting coal as a primary source of energy. So we'll just have a very quick look in terms of what Coro are actually planning for this, and we'll kick off just initially with a bit of background information on the Duyung asset, and for that I'll pass over to Pete.
Thanks, Mark, and good evening, everyone. So as Mark said, we'll talk first about our foundation gas asset, which is the Duyung PSC offshore Indonesia. And this is a shallow gas accumulation. We call it the Mako gas field. And Coro farmed into this license in 2019, so we have a 15% share, and Conrad Petroleum is the operator and largest shareholder. You can see on the graph there, it's well explored. There's been 6 wells drilled on the structure over the years, the last 3 of those by the current operator, Conrad. So we have a lot of technical data about the field, and certainly about the gas composition as well. It's dry gas, there's minimal contaminants, and high methane content, so minimal processing required. You can see on the bottom right there the resource table. When we farmed into the license in 2019, the resource estimates were the top row there, the pre-drill estimates. In the back end of 2019, the operator drilled the Tambak 1 and Tambak 2 wells, which you can see on the map there, and really that de-risked the structure significantly. There's a lot of data gathered from that campaign, and that led to an independently certified doubling of the resource base, which we announced last year in May 2020. So doubling of 2C and 3C resources, and just a little bit less than doubling of the 1C resource. So really the sort of subsurface, subsea element of the project has been de-risked, the technical side. So the partner in the ventures, sorry, the partners in the venture are now moving on to sort of the commercial aspects and how do we monetize this gas. So you can see here, the field is located, it's a prolific basin. There's existing infrastructure all around, really. So most importantly, we have the West Natuna transportation system. This is a pipeline that pipes gas directly into Singapore, and it's about 100 kilometers from the Mako field. So that pipeline has spare capacity. There's a number of maturing and sort of later life fields, which have capacity that needs to be replaced through that pipeline. So one option would be to hook out the Mako field into that pipeline with a new pipe from our field directly into that transportation system. And there's also closer than that pipeline, there's existing gas processing facilities on other fields. So there's the potential to access those processing facilities on a tariff basis, subject to commercial terms which are being discussed with other operators. So there's several development concepts which are being considered by the operator, and ultimately relatively straightforward concepts. So we look forward to maturing those and certainly providing more news as that comes to hand. The other key aspects of the project in the sort of short to medium term is having the updated plan of development approved by the Indonesian authorities. The original plan of development was for the lower resource base you saw on the previous slide, so we need to get that reapproved with the higher resource base, and that's coming. And the other thing is the signature of a gas sales agreement. So there's a heads of agreement in place with a Singapore gas buyer, but that needs to be converted into a definitive gas sales agreement, and there's a number of other off-takers in play as well. So the operator's leading the charge on those discussions. So those are the sort of the last real commercial milestones we see that will convert those resources you saw on the previous slide, convert those to reserves, and ultimately enable the partners to take FID on the project in the not too distant future.
Thanks, Pete. So we'll move on now to the renewable energy projects that we have. So in March 2021, Coro made the announcement that it had moved to its next phase of the clean energy transition with its acquisition of GEPL. This delivered not only an experienced team with expertise in renewables as well as oil and gas, but it also brought a strong 4 gigawatt pipeline within Southeast Asia. Add that to the joint development opportunities with ION Ventures, which we'll come to shortly, and the flagship projects in the Philippines, which are identified here as project priority 1 on the graph. You can expect to see some very heavy news flow coming through as all this activity starts to progress throughout the year. So why the Philippines? Well, as we've mentioned, Coro now has this key focus within the Philippines, and those flagship projects really are the cornerstone of the renewable portfolio that we'll be moving forward with. Now, we've been involved within the Philippines for some time now, and every time we go across, it's always amazing just to see how things progress and how things change. And given that the Philippines is actually based on approximately 7,000 islands, the forecast for growth is actually exponential. Ultimately, ADB have given a growth reading of 6.4%, which creates a very strong investment case. And this has actually been recognized by HSBC, who over the last couple of days have actually announced that the Philippines is actually the second strongest, only after Vietnam, in terms of renewable energy capability, production and development. Equally, the annual energy demand within the Philippines is expected to increase by 64 gigawatts by 2040, which is a huge increase to where it is today. But also, they're actually starting to look for more energy security because of their reliance upon fossil fuels and imported coal and oil and gas. Now, that energy security itself has actually been driven by a very young population, and actually amazes me every time I actually arrive into the Philippines, just how young the population is and how much of a difference they've made, no matter where you go, no matter where you look. But that young population is actually now starting to look for that energy security to come from renewables. Because of that, legislation has also been heavily in favour of renewable energy, and with clean energy being given priority to the grid. The government have also given infrastructure upgrades and are hugely supportive, providing multiple financial incentives as well for developers who are actually interested in coming into the Philippines. Another big key focus point for us when we actually started to look for projects and where to look within the region was the opportunity for off-takers, the people that are actually going to buy the power and who's actually ultimately going to take it. Now, we're quite fortunate in the Philippines as a deregulated market. Now, ultimately, this means that we can actually sell power directly to the spot market. Obviously, there's fluctuations within that cost with particularly good highs and so not some good lows. But again, with our partnership with Ion Ventures as battery storage, then we have that opportunity then to actually start exploiting that. Government direct procurement is another option. We can sell direct to government without any problem whatsoever. But we can also sell directly to local energy retailers or cooperatives, as they're known within the Philippines. But the key point for us that we're really focusing on at the moment is direct sales to the blue chip, large scale industrial organizations who provide very, very strong PPAs. And there is absolutely no curtailment risk within the Philippines because of the availability of grid over anything else. So ultimately, those long-term power purchase agreements are a huge benefit for the projects and being able to get stuff moving forward. So we will just focus upon the first two projects that we have in the Philippines and just give a very brief overview of these. I'm conscious of time and making sure we have some questions. We have two key projects at the moment that we're looking at. A 100 megawatt solar project and a 100 megawatt onshore wind project. Both of these projects are based in the Visayas region, and if you just have a quick look at those maps there, you can see that Visayas is kind of the central region within the Philippines. Both of the projects are close to grid connection with ample available capacity to evacuate the power, which is crucial for these kind of projects, because the last thing you do want is to have the opportunity to produce power but no way to get it onto the grid. The proposed locations are actually on government land, which will obtain a lifetime project lease, and that's very inclusive in terms of what we're doing, and we're working very closely with the government to get that organized and sorted at the moment. But more importantly than anything else is that we have multiple energy evacuation routes. Now, what does that mean? Well, ultimately, it means that we actually don't have to sell the power locally. The government have actually done quite heavy investment into the grid in the Philippines, which means that there's a lot of those 7,000 islands I mentioned earlier are actually already connected. There are some that aren't, and ultimately, those sleeve PPAs in the heavy industrial areas means we can actually then sell power as and when we need to. So even though we're producing power in Visayas, it doesn't necessarily mean to say that we have to sell it in Visayas. So just to give a bit of an understanding of sleeve PPAs, ultimately, we can put power in the grid. Obviously, it's not ours. We don't have our name on it, but it goes into the grid. It's then distributed, but the end user then does the offtake, and it's metered at that point as well. Incidentally, the government are actually incentivizing people to move away from the overpopulated areas of Manila due to overcrowding. And Cebu, being the oldest capital, is now seeing a large migration of people back to their old homes in Manila. Again, it kind of flags up we can sell power wherever we need to. It gives us the opportunity to sell power within Cebu or within the local region with Visayas, but also then if we need to, we can also then sell it up into Manila and anywhere else for that matter that we want. So also based in Versailles is that wind project. It's a 100 megawatt wind, but it certainly has capacity to be expanded even further should we need to. It's within the same region, giving all the benefits that we've already discussed there, but it also has some of the best wind flows within the region. Now, the one thing that we do need for wind projects is steady wind flow. We don't want gusts, we don't want to be on typhoon paths, we don't want to be within cyclone areas. And obviously with the Philippines actually going through a typhoon at the moment, we've been very cognizant of exactly what's happening where. But so far, and certainly as far back as records go, there have been no typhoons recorded within the area that we're looking to develop these projects. We are currently working through the permitting process for both of the projects, and the government have given in principle approval, and we're now working through the process with them. I should also mention just briefly commercialization. There's three kind of key options here. We have the opportunity to sell the projects outright. We could also develop the projects ourselves and raise project equity. But we're actually exploring the option of partnering with equity providers at the moment and then bringing in debt alongside. And those conversations have actually been very productive, are ongoing, and are actually managing to get everything in place. So again, it's a very, very positive indicators of exactly where it's going within country. So Pete, I will pass back to you again for a bit about Ion Ventures.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So Mark mentioned at the outset, we made our investment in Ion Ventures in Q3 of last year. And this is a partnership we're really excited about. So Ion is a developer of clean energy projects in the UK and Southeast Asia, primarily energy storage, so utility scale batteries, but also off-grid solutions and other flexible energy solutions. So Ion, as you can see there, they have quite a mature UK pipeline of projects, a large pipeline in the UK, and then a growth focus on Southeast Asia, which is slightly less mature, but we're very much aligned in seeing the potential in that region. So first and foremost, we invested in Ion to make a return on our investment, and we expect to, and we work quite closely with Ion and look forward to sharing their news over the coming weeks and months as they really start to build out their business. But aside from that capital return, we also have a right of first refusal to invest directly in Ion's Southeast Asian projects, and we're looking at a number of things as we speak, and really just trying to determine if those meet our investment metrics. And we've aligned ourselves with really regional experts, but also industry experts. So you know, a lot of experience developing these types of assets, and certainly very relevant experience that we can leverage, as well as their relationships across the region. So very much the early days of our partnership, but there'll be lots of news to share shortly as Ion sort of builds out their business, and we look forward to bringing that to shareholders in the market in due course.
Thanks, Pete. So just to close out and give a quick overview and a summary, we've included a very indicative schedule for what we see coming up over 2021 and 2022. But as you can see from what we've discussed and what we've already mentioned within the presentation, now is the start of an incredible journey for Coro, which will ultimately see us leading the transition in Southeast Asia to clean energy. We have a very clear strategy with key milestones for this year and beyond. The divestment of the Italian portfolio is advanced, providing 100% focused on Southeast Asia. With respect to the Duyung gas assets in Indonesia, monetization, of course, provides us the company with a solid platform within Southeast Asia, and key milestones such as the gas sales agreement, the plan of development, and the final investment decision, the FID, will give investors ongoing news flow as we kind of cross this year and go into next. You'll see our black to blue to green strategy is also now seriously underway, and with exciting flagship renewable projects on track this year, with plenty of news flow coming through as we start to reach those key milestones. So all in all, Southeast Asia, I hope you agree, is a very compelling case. Increasing demand added to the transition of the energy plan, and seeing that go through. That will see Coro provide a steady development path to which we expect to see some very exceptional and some very exciting rewards for our investors. And we will open to questions.
So kicking off, I think there's a number of people who are probably familiar with kind of old Coro, if you like. So can investors take this as people either familiar or not, like a kind of completely clean slate now? How far off are you being if you like, a completely different business to what you might have been before?
Clearly, we are going through that level of transition, and we flagged that with the acquisition of GEPL, but then also then bringing in the new executives as well, and that team will only strengthen as we progress. Old Coro is still obviously very much there with the De Jong assets. The Italian assets we will be divesting, but that then gives us clean line of sight to focus 100% on the Southeast Asian market. There are obviously things that we need to take into consideration with the De Jong asset, and we'll be pushing those forward. But ultimately, yes, we will be pushing much further with that transition to clean energy.
And with De Jong, do you have commitments, financial commitments for the development of the asset? If so, how will you fund those, or will you look to sell down some of your ownership in that field?
I'll hand that one over directly to Pete.
Yeah, sure. So we are committed in the sense that we're a 15% participant. So you know, we have annual budgeting for the project, and you know, we're signed on for those costs. At the moment, we're in a fairly capex or spend light phase. The sort of heavy spend appraisal drilling campaign is behind us, and it's more focused on commercial elements at the moment. Clearly, as we move towards FID, we'll need to, when spend will ramp up, we'll need to sharpen our focus on financing the next stage. There's a number of options. Nothing's been ruled in or out. You know, number of options from outright divestment to farm out to funding, continuing to fund our 15% share right through development. So all of those options are on the table. We expect over the next 6 to 12 months that a lot of those things will become a lot clearer, and we'll certainly be sharing our plans with shareholders and the wider market.
Thank you. You mentioned energy security a few times, and being very coal reliant. Where's the coal coming from at the moment? Where are they importing from?
So majoritively the coal for Philippines is actually coming in from either Indonesia or Australia. Unfortunately, the Philippines isn't particularly selective over the coal it does actually bring in, so it's not necessarily of the highest grade or highest quality either, and hence that demand really to make that transition and start to move into the cleaner, more thorough renewable projects.
And on renewables, I think you highlighted solar and wind projects. Would you look at other types of renewable energy, tidal or any other sources?
Yeah, we're not technology agnostic. We'll quite happily look at the projects as they come in on their merits. Initially, the projects are solar and wind. They are the key flagstones for us for a multitude of different reasons. Obviously, the Philippines is actually quite intensive in terms of geothermal activity and has some of the best resources around. It is something that we'll look at, but right here, right now, our key focus is on the wind and solar projects.
And then can you just give a bit more colour on funding for the Filipino projects or for the most advanced of the renewable projects? I think you had a few different options, so just kind of flesh them out a little bit for us.
Yeah, sure. So the renewable projects within the Philippines are 100 megawatt solar and a 100 megawatt wind. Now, obviously, they have very different size and scale in terms of their project spend. But to get the projects to ready to build, we are already funded for those projects, and we'll be able to get them to ready to build stage. At that point, we're then looking to bring in equity partners and then obviously debt partners on the back of that as well. Philippines law is actually quite carefully written around what you can and what you can't do in terms of bringing in levels of debt. Now, we have been in conversations with some infrastructure funds who are already interested in coming alongside and providing equity for the projects. And it will be at project level. It won't be at any form of divestment in terms of the equity holding within TopCo. And then equally, we have the debt coming in as well. And we've been speaking to multiple different opportunities there, everything from the local banks who are intensively cash rich and actually being subsidized by the government to actually provide funding for renewable projects, and also then the DFIs and GFIs.
And the final question about the tariff regime in the Philippines, is it, excuse me, just if you could talk a bit how that works.
The Philippines is not unusual with most of Southeast Asia. There are no auction systems as yet, as clearly defined in terms of the normal auction rollout. In terms of the cooperatives, there is a competitive selection process. In terms of spot pricing, it is whatever's on spot at that particular moment. So you are at the will of the market. In terms of those the corporate providers, we can actually provide power at whatever rate we want. And there is precedence for that, allowing us to be able to provide power on a long-term PPA, to be able to provide power ultimately at the prices that are market sensitive and market fixed. So again, multiple different options in terms of how that fits together. We are looking to de-risk anything within there by having a selection of different opportunities. We'll be looking at the cooperatives. We'll be looking at the spot market for any value add, so we can actually then work with our friends over at Ion Ventures and then start to use the battery storage. But ultimately, we'll be looking at those blue chip industrial users who are utilizing large amounts of energy at any one time.
Lovely. Well, Mark, Pete, it looks like you've got a busy year ahead of you. Thank you very much indeed for coming and joining us this evening.
Thanks very much, Roland, and we look forward to speaking to people again soon.